Inner Light Show. It's time to stop just surviving, and it's time to begin to thrive. It's time to live happier and healthier. Turn stress into strength. Noted author Debbie Mandel will show you how to move beyond personal doubts and fears and into positive perception to turn on your inner light. Here's your host, Debbie Mandel.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to my show. Our guest expert is Charlotte Kasl, Ph.D., a psychotherapist, an expert on trauma and addiction. She created a 16-step empowerment model as an alternative to Alcoholics Anonymous, and she is the author of If the Buddha Raised Kids. Learn about a new but ancient approach to raising enlightened children while you grow enlightened too. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Now, Charlotte, why Buddhism for parents, not Christianity, Judaism, or Islam?
Well, there are wonderful things in all these religions that can be a guide. I find in Buddhism the wonderful peacefulness of looking at how we get attached and set agendas for people, and it's so clearly spelled out. And I think that's the source of a lot of contention with children, is essentially we want them to fit our script and we want them to do what we want instead of getting to know them, finding out who they are. You know, Buddhism talks about, the sun under the clouds or the jewel under the mud. That's what we want to help children do, is find out who they are.
So, in a sense, parents are really a bit bullying to children, and to be a child is to be raised by an adult who compels a child to do his or her will for the better or the worse. So in that sense, some children do suffer, right?
Well, yes, it's on a continuum for sure. But when, for instance, a mother, and I'll get to a father also, I don't want to always blame the mother.
Thank you for that.
buys all these darling clothes for her little girl, but she's really dressing her up like a little object, like a child dresses up a Barbie doll, because she thinks it reflects on her. And when people say, oh, what an adorable child, she glows inside. It's all about her needs, her ego. She didn't say to the child, well, what would you like to wear? You can take kids shopping at 3 and 4 years old, and they can at least pick out the color. I mean, you don't say you have anything you want, but here's a choice, this or that. And you start helping them find out who they are, what colors they like, what feels good to them. So we have a lot of scripts of how kids should be, including I want them to be happy, and I want them to have good self-esteem. And so the parent then starts on a project to get the child engaged in various sports or clubs or activities, and the child ends up feeling like a project in need of fixing. What the kid really needs is someone to say, hey, you're not feeling so good about yourself. Tell me about that. You know, what's that about? What do you think? And we engage in a real conversation where the child can express their feelings. We're right there with them. We're not trying to mold, cajole, fix, control them.
Well, in order to do that, and you make that fine point in the book, but it's a lot for a parent to deal. I know that I had to take many driving lessons before I passed my road test. Uh-huh. And it took me 3 times to pass that road test before I got a license. I don't get a license to be a parent. I don't get any training. So if I'm not an actualized adult, if I'm stressed because of work or a lack of self-empowerment, that's going to translate to my child. It's kind of difficult to be an ideal parent in a real parent world.
Well, nobody's an ideal parent, so we'll all just get over that right now. We do good enough parenting, and the thing is, we learn how to build bridges back. When I was, insensitive or lost my temper with my daughter, I had an adopted daughter who didn't attach very well, and I would come back and say, I was feeling out of control, and that's not good, and I'm sure that was scary for you, and I apologize. You can come back, and that teaches the child something wonderful. Like, oh, I don't have to be perfect, and I can help it get okay again. I can make it right.
So while we're on this topic, and you mentioned this, that sometimes parental ego gets in the way. So how do I separate my image or creating the child in my image and not take everything my child does personally?
Well, yeah, that is the spiritual journey that's underlying parenting. Because to see someone else as who they are, as separate from us, is part of the journey. Like the idea that everyone's just running off their conditioning. They're just doing whatever they know how to do in the moment. And what I found with a lot of parents, because I interviewed families where some of the parents had had a terrible childhood, yet were very good parents. They talked about parenting. They read about parenting. They took parenting classes. They really made it important to do these classes. There's a wonderful quote by a woman who, she said, I was about to, strangle my kid or something. I was so mad. And she said, then I said, okay, use what you taught, use what you learned in the parenting class, use those skills. And she said it was really hard because they felt so foreign, but she said she did. And I'll quote, I stopped lecturing and started listening. I got calm and let him talk and try to understand where he was coming from. And that's the name of the game. And she said, it was amazing. He worked his problem out all by himself without my incredible wisdom.
That's wonderful. I mean, but again, this sounds so sweet and idealized. Take a 2-year-old having a tantrum and in a store, and let him express himself. And work it out, and he's not working it out.
I'd say it's not just let him express himself so much as can you stay calm. That's what we always need to do in a stressful situation, because if the child's really dysregulated, and the kid or the teenager, and the parent dysregulates and starts screaming and yelling, then everything is wild. Now, if the child's dysregulated and the parent can stay calm and pick them up, hi, honey, you're upset, I know that, and not be embarrassed if you're at the grocery store, and just be a little soothing. And don't be, stop that, or I'm going to take you and leave you in the car. I mean, these horrible things.
Yes, horrible.
I understand where they come from, but if we can just stay calm, in general, children are calmer children.
They inhale us. Well, we're going to stay calm and go to commercial break, and we will return with Dr. Charlotte Kasl, author of If the Buddha Raised Kids.
Now you can take Debbie Mandel home with you. Her book, Turn On Your Inner Life, Fitness for Body, Mind, and Soul, will help you decompress with healthy, positive, concrete solutions. Common life challenges are presented so that you can quickly find the help you need. Emotional tips, original meditations, and a fun and easy-to-follow fitness workout for each mindset. This revolutionary new method will help you rewire mind and body to take back your power. Get it on Amazon.
Are you overwhelmed with the burden of taking care of children, parents, or both? Are you taking care of everyone else except yourself? It's time to change your habits and re-energize. Debbie Mandel gives you an innovative and easy-to-follow program for good health and happiness. In her magical new book, Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout, Debbie Mandel shows you step-by-step how to find the optimal balance between giving and receiving, and guides you to exercise and eat right to take care of yourself. What are you waiting for? Read Changing Habits and start training for your life. Life does not need to be a burden. Get Changing Habits, The Caregiver's Total Workout on Amazon.
You're listening to the Turn On Your Inner Light show. I'm your host, Debbie Mandel, and I'm speaking with Dr. Charlotte Kasl, author of If the Buddha Raised Kids. Now, we were speaking about calmness and equanimity on behalf of the parent while toddler or teenager, same mindset, same oppositional mindset goes crazy. But thinking along those lines, should we be teaching meditation in school?
I don't know about teaching meditation, but we can teach ways to be calmer. For instance, in some of the therapy groups I've had, we would help people find a phrase that calmed them down and soothed them so they would break that trance of going into their defensive child mode of, oh, this isn't right, stop this, and calm them down. It would be like, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, or this too shall pass. It could be a religious thing, a secular thing, whatever, that could break that losing it stance. And I think this is where paying attention and mindfulness, that's what I'd like to teach in schools, is noticing when you feel hurt, when you feel sad, when you feel angry. Can you identify those feelings? Can you know what they are? Because this helps kids feel safe inside. They can really identify what's going on, and they can link those feelings to events that happen, I remember my grandson saying, well, I had anger when my teacher did such and such. It was like, he could say that. And that calms us down right there. So the more we help children identify feelings, the better off they are. And, of course, that means we need to work on identifying our own. And a lot of this book is about helping parents. And I want to say, going back to what we said earlier, if you do it a lot of the time, some of the time, everything helps, okay? I mean, my father once came back to me and said, I just know I pick fights with you all the time. This was when I was a teenager, because he always was trying to get me to drink my milk in the morning, and I didn't like milk, and it's like, leave me alone. And he came back and he said, I say in the morning, I don't want to fight with you. I don't want to pick a fight with Charlotte. I'm not going to do it. And he said, and there I am doing it again. And he said, I hate that I do that. That was so wonderful to hear, that he had reflected on that he had a place that got out of sync and argued and picked fights with me, and he was picking the fight. Because all I heard from my siblings and everyone else is, why do you get your father so upset? It's like, sorry, he upsets himself, It's about him. He needs to look at that.
So that's a wonderful revelation for a child to know it's not me, it's them. And I think teenagers try to yank your chain. I remember coming home and picking a fight with my mother because I thought it would be fun as a teenager. I just liked that energy. And no one would give me as good a fight as my mother, so...
Well, exactly. It's delicious to think you have that kind of power over this person who's had so much power over you.
Mm-hmm.
And I adopted this child who didn't attach very well. And those children don't trust, for the most part, and they find power by causing you pain and by getting you upset. So she might goad me for 2 or 3 days straight. So this was a great learning experience, one I didn't always like, but I had to learn to calm down.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to function.
Right.
And so your experience really contributed to helping your patients implement, because you've gone through it yourself. Now, I liked in the book your advice about making friends with fear and dealing with fear. And who has more fears than a child?
Sure. Well, parents actually. Control is the flip side of fear. Let's say we're again, this is the father now who wants to have his daughter be an Olympic swimmer, and doesn't, when he answers the phone that her friends have called, he just says she's not here. All he does is pressure her to swim. And by 15, she quits and gets on drugs. So control like that breeds rebellion,
Yeah, if you pull it too tight, sure.
You pull it too tight. Yeah. And it's like, well, we have to have boundaries. Those are very important. And the child isn't there to be our friend or our intimate other. And I think it's so important to keep coming back to whose needs are getting met here. Because like when a mother will say or a father will say, well, my child kind of pulls away when I want to hug them, we'll check, is that because you're lonely that moment and need a hug? Or you want to make sure your child loves you and they're busy doing something else? So if it's your need, the child reads that.
But what if you want to hug your child and the child rejects you and it's purely to hug your child because that child doesn't want to be touched or has issues?
Well, certainly there's difficulty with autistic children with touch. But most children do like to be touched if it's on their terms. They want to be connected.
What do you mean by on their terms?
Well, people who are even mildly, not quite indifferent, but loose and don't say, oh, come hug Grandpa, and the kid goes, oh my God, this big person being so needy. And we pull away from that. We do that as adults. But hey, if Mom's playing and we're romping around and throwing a ball and playing catch, and you wrap your arm around them and say, wow, that was really fun, that physical contact is easy. And sometimes kids like it, sometimes and not others. For instance, children often like a parent to come and snuggle a little before bedtime. Little kids. But I think it's so subtle. But we have to read body language of children. You'll see a parent sort of strong-arming them in and the kid kind of pulling back and trying to get away.
Or like a 5-year-old boy saying, oh, Ma, please don't kiss me. You're embarrassing me.
Right.
But we go to commercial break, and we will return with Dr. Charlotte Kasl,
okay,
author of If the Buddha Raised Kids.
Dear listeners, I'm excited to tell you about my new book, Addicted to Stress. This is a message you need to hear. Are you addicted to stress? Do you do it all while everyone depends on you? Where's all this pressure coming from? It is coming from inside you. This is why my publisher, John Wiley, asked me to write Addicted to Stress, a woman's 7-step program to reclaim joy and spontaneity in life. This fun-to-read book teaches proven strategies to reclaim your life, silence your inner critic, build a healthy body, and reframe your thoughts to change your life for the better. Dare to be happy without the guilt. Addicted to Stress is easy to get. It's available at Barnes & Noble and other fine bookstores everywhere. You can also buy it at Amazon and other online retailers.
We're back with Dr. Charlotte Kasl, author of If the Buddha Raised Kids. Now, Charlotte,
add a little tiny piece here.
Yes.
There's a subtitle I'd like to add in.
Sure.
It's Raising Children to Create a More Peaceful World. So the context of this is how can we help a child make peace inside themselves so they are peaceful in the world as they grow up and care about justice and have empathy for others and are easy with differences.
It sounds like a dream. It really does. And I guess it begins with one family at a time. Now, in our time period, so many children are diagnosed with ADD or ADHD. What's the upside of that? How can I navigate?
Well, I think, first of all, is to get it really clear if it is ADD or if it's not. I tell a story in there about a child who, he lived on Mountain Dew, Chicken McNuggets, all his food was white. He didn't get enough exercise, no one read to him. He just simply didn't know how to regulate his feelings. And and he watched violent videos all the time. Well, when there was a change in the family, the violent videos were gone, and they got rid of the Mountain Dew. He started using water occasionally, and started having some somewhat healthy food. That child calmed down so much. So I want to say there's that piece.
Mm-hmm.
But ADD kids have a lot of energy. I happen to be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Not real severe, but I had learning problems with reading, amazingly. And the main thing is getting help and learning and understanding. You know, the daughter I adopted, she just couldn't learn to read in school, but she was stressed. She had had 3 years of total stress in her life before I adopted her, and she wanted to read. She carried books around. I read to her every day. She pretended to read, but it just didn't happen. So I took her to the university and got her a kind of an appraisal of what was going on. And they said, I think she needs individual tutoring, and they recommended a student who was doing it for a class. And the student came to the house, and Janelle was just so happy that the big girl who came, you know. And in 10 weeks, she was reading at grade level. And she had a second tutor for 10 weeks, and she was reading at third grade level. You know, it's like, okay, we have to we have to know the problem and find the solution. So also we need to know, is that kid having a lot of anxiety and trauma at home before we start drugging them, you know? And there certainly is true ADD and ADHD. But parents find a lot of ways to work with it. And there's some pretty good books on that, too.
And it also shows us, I think, that within the educational system, one size doesn't fit all.
Oh.
And we are conformist in education. All eyes front on the teacher and so forth. And the teacher brings her own issues to the classroom and her prejudices. So sometimes parents, what you're saying is like an early intervention, when you can affect the change before there's collateral damage. Do I understand that correctly?
Absolutely, and maybe a Waldorf school would be better, or a Quaker school. And I described some of these fabulous turnaround schools where it is very different. Some of these progressive schools, they don't sit in rows. They help teach ethics, not through calling it ethics, but by helping kids understand what it feels like to feel left out and how to have empathy and compassion for each other. And they teach a global consciousness, and they do all kinds of hands-on learning. I was kind of a kinesthetic learner. I learned by doing. And man, that was not what school was like. I was sitting there swinging my legs under the seat and, you know, just coping. And, you know, I liked school basically. I liked learning. I loved learning. But, oh my gosh, it could have been so much better.
And we carry those labels, right, those grade labels throughout life. And I think what you're saying is to, again, what we started our conversation with is that get into the mindset and the heart of the child, maybe have a beginner's mind with that and a beginner's heart, so that you can see what the child is able to do. Well, Charlotte, our time together has just flown, and this has been a delight. And I urge people, I wish I could have read the book years ago when I raised my children. I would have been a better parent, and you wouldn't have heard me screaming down the block. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's just a pleasure.
Affirmation of the week. Cultivate a relaxed confidence. And now for the latest medical trends. In a nationally representative sample of nearly 3,000 children and adolescents, those who had higher concentrations of urinary BPA, a manufactured chemical found in consumer products, had significantly increased odds of being obese. Although many women coping with hot flashes and other distressing symptoms of menopause have turned to black cohosh supplements as a treatment alternative, a new review by the Cochrane Library finds no evidence that the herb is effective. Children of immigrants are outperforming children whose family trees have deeper roots in the U.S., learning more in school and then making smoother transitions into adulthood, according to sociologists at the Johns Hopkins University. Women who go into early menopause are twice as likely to suffer from coronary heart disease and stroke, from Johns Hopkins research. The association holds true in patients from a variety of different ethnic backgrounds, the study found, and is independent of traditional cardiovascular disease risk factors, the scientists emphasize. Now, scholars examined whether women speak less than men when a group collaborates to solve a problem. In most groups that they studied, the time that women spoke was significantly less than their proportional representation, amounting to less than 75% of the time that men spoke. The management of Parkinson's disease has traditionally centered on drug treatment. However, there has been increasing support for the inclusion of rehab therapies such as physiotherapy to supplement pharmacological and neurological treatment. If you stay in a hotel, the germiest surfaces are the hotel remote and the main light switch. Clean them with a disinfectant wipe. And a coalition of consumer groups is recommending that the U.S. Department of Agriculture get tuna out of school lunchrooms after tests of canned tuna sold to schools found highly variable levels of mercury, and in some cases higher than federal guidelines. Well, while you're at it, watch the rice, which has arsenic nowadays. Well, I come to the close of another show. I have an educational website on stress management, totally free. TurnOnYourInnerLight.com. All the guest experts, all these wonderful interviews are archived for your listening pleasure. There's a link, takes you right into YouTube. Subscribe to my free newsletter from TurnOnYourInnerLight.com. Get a new fresh article on stress management, all the health tips I don't even get to say because there are so many, and the latest interview emailed directly to you with that